All right, I'm back. This is part three of the trilogy of the Human Condition, Kobayashi's epic film, 9.5 hours. I did work my way through it finally, and it was an excellent journey. So where we left off, part two, Kaji, having been conscripted into the Japanese army in Manchuria, was fighting on the front lines. He got overrun by the Soviets, the Soviet army, and pretty much is left with a ragtag group of his fellow troops, and he is on his own, in hostile territory. I mean, on one side, you've got the Chinese that obviously don't have a whole lot of love for the Japanese having invaded their country. And then you've got the Soviets on the other side trying to overrun them and successfully doing so. So Kaji is pretty much left. I mean, he and his followers are now forced to just kind of fend for themselves in the wilds of Manchuria. And through this process, I mean, he's basically, his only hope is to get back to his wife. I mean, that's the only thing that keeps him going. He's lost all aspects of his principles and those type of things that he held dear in a fight for his life. In fact, I guess the best comment that can be made about this film is when Kaji walks up to a village looking for food. He and his friends haven't eaten, and they've been walking for days through forest and rough terrain. He finally meets up with one of his friends from the army, and the guy says, Kaji, you look like you've changed. And he says, well, fighting for your life, killing or being killed changes you. So I think that's kind of the commentary on this film. Principles and philosophies are all great, but when you're at the bare bones of a life and death struggle, those things kind of go out the window, quite honestly. And I think that's what Kaji's figured out. And all of the principles and things that he held dear in terms of socialism and humanity and respect for one another and respect for humanity have been slowly, eaten away by the harsh realities of war. And now you throw on top of that a fight for survival. You're trying not to starve. You're in a foreign country that neither side, everywhere you look, you are really an enemy. So yeah, he's got his hands full. They run into this little ragtag group runs into some civilians that are in equally bad plight, starving, kind of looking for some help, and so they follow the soldiers, and they try to traipse through the Manchurian forest and woods and desolate landscape to try to find food or somewhere to seek shelter, and they eventually run into the Soviet troops. And at this point, Kaji, who is kind of the last philosophical point he holds dearly, is that socialism is, he's held socialism in high regard. He's seen how fascism and totalitarianism through the Japanese military is a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing for humanity and for the average person. So he's got this ideal that the socialist side is probably the side that will more adhere to his values and treat people with respect and humanity. Because I'm laughing. I mean, it's such a naive thing that he decides, well, I either die out here or I just give myself up. So he and his group, after some discussion, finally say, well, we're just going to surrender to the Soviets. And that's, of course, a disaster. And his last philosophical hope is that socialism will save him. And what he quickly finds is whatever system, capitalism, socialism, totalitarianism, fascism, underneath all that, you still got people that are good. There's good people. There's bad people, evil people. And no system in and of itself is a saving grace. And what he finds out is that the Soviet troops are in their military machine, whether you want to call them socialist or whatever you call them, they're still operating like any other military engine. And and these guys as prisoners of war are not treated well. So the final building blocks of his mindset are completely torn down, which gets exacerbated by the fact that he's got a low-level functionary within his group that's kind of sucking up to the Soviets by punishing and corralling what's left of the Japanese prisoners of war, torturing those. In fact, he was a carryover from the second film. There was an important part of that where he killed a family of civilians that Kaji was trying to protect. So this kind of leads to the ultimate travesty, which is Kaji in a complete mental breakdown and just of rage and all this series of emotions brought on by the accumulation of what he's gone through. Grabs a chain and beats the shit out of and kills his fellow compatriot who's just a piece of crap. I mean, the guy deserves it, but with Kaji's pacifism, you wouldn't have expected it. So it's come full circle. The pacifist socialist is now just as part of the machine of life and death and kill or be killed as anybody else. It doesn't matter what your philosophy is. So the film just came full circle at that point. And, it's a great realistic portrayal of how these conceptual operating philosophies, capitalism, socialism, communism, a lot of those, I mean, are esoteric concepts that when you get down to the harsh realities of day-to-day life, don't mean crap. They really don't. And the idealistic young Kaji quickly realizes that in an unfortunate way. So that's The Human Condition, and that was part 3. 9.5 hours. Yeah, I watched each part. There's actually the way you can do this. You can either watch 6 parts, as is the Japanese cut, which is 2 parts per the trilogy of each, or you can just watch it in 3 parts, 3 hours each, which is the international version. Either way, it's a epic piece of storytelling and one of the most powerful tales of human ordeal, human drama that I can imagine, right up there with Papillon and a number of other films of that nature. Yeah, that's whether it's the greatest movie ever made, that's talking pretty big. I mean, you've got Citizen Kane, you've got a long list of films that certainly would vie for that #1 spot, but this certainly has a right to be spoken of as one of the greatest movies ever made. You can't argue with it. And this Arrow release is fantastic. I haven't done a comparison to the Criterion. I don't have the Criterion, but this is more than satisfactory to me. As far as special features, it is light on special features. I will admit that. Each part has about a 5 to 7 minute commentary on the film, and it's okay. It's not great. It doesn't give you anything earth shattering. This book that came with it was actually a lot more revealing and interesting because it interviews the director Kobayashi, and it goes through in detail his career and how he formulated similar concepts to Kaji. And that's why I think the film holds near and dear to his heart. He was very much a pacifist socialist and anti-war. And so this film was something that resonated with him. And it was important for him to make it, and I'm glad he did. So that is The Human Condition. And if you don't have this film, I would highly recommend you pick up the Criterion or the Arrow copy of this, because it's something that I think, whatever your genre of particular genre of interest is, this is a film that I think deserves. If you're a cinephile, I think this film deserves your attention. So yeah, that's The Human Condition, and I appreciate you watching. Thanks.